Hey everyone, my name is Matt. Walk with my backyard on this morning, early spring morning here in Minnesota. The snow has melted. It is still kind of cold. The birds are chirping and everything is still dead. And it will stay dead for a couple more months. This is the garden bench that I just finished building over in the Wood Whisperer Guild. It features some really nice curved elements, nice curved crest rail, nice shapely armrest, and a fun curve for the front leg. It's joined with mortise and tenons and is constructed out of thermally modified ash. Let me show you how I built it. I picked up three 12-foot long 8-quarter boards of thermally modified ash from Wood from the Hood in Minneapolis. I of course did my best job to lay out my parts to get the best grain possible, like the grain following the curve of the crest rail and the goofy bend thing in the front leg. Thermally modified woods have been around for a while, but mostly in the building industry, where it's primarily used for decking. The thermal modification process involves heating the wood in an oxygen-free environment so it can't combust. This heating, or essentially baking, makes the wood very stable, rot, insect, and water resistant, and imparts a darker color. The final color can be controlled by the baking temperature. The wood I'm using is a lower temp bake, which makes it more of a brown. Higher temp bakes produce almost a black color. The downside to this processing is the wood becomes more brittle, resulting in potential for chipping and splintering while working. That's not a huge deal though if your blades are sharp and your cuts are supported, because aren't all of our blades always sharp and our cuts always supported? If we're doing it right. I'm going to start the construction with these side assemblies. I'll cut the rails and leg blocks to length and set the rails aside for later while I focus on the legs. To start forming the legs, I'll cut a wedge off to establish the slope of the backrest. Then I can make a couple of stop rip cuts to begin separating the first leg from the block. Due to the curvature of the blade, there's a little bit of material remaining before the leg will separate. I'll complete the cut at the bandsaw and remove the extra waste with a chisel. Now I can repeat that process to separate the next leg from the block. With the rear legs out of the way, I can move on to making the front legs. These have this offset detail, so I'll set up the saw to make the straight cuts and then connect them with the curve at the bandsaw. I'll use the oscillating sander to refine the curves and do a bit of cleanup work and blending work with some hand tools. Now on to the joinery. This bench will be joined with mortise and tenons. I'll start by cutting all the mortises into the legs for the rails. I'll take care of the mortises for the armrests later. Normally I'm more of a mortiser guy, but I decided to give router cut mortises a shot for this project. I have a few of these Triton routers, so I grabbed the fence off the other router's edge guide to create a mortise guide. The two fences surround the part, so the router can only move forward and back and can't move side to side. This takes most of the uncertainty of the operation. Some of these mortises required a bit of creativity to keep the router positioned, but I worked through all of them without issue. I can get started on the tenons, and I'm starting with the easy ones that will make up these side assemblies. I like to score the tenon shoulders first before clearing out the bulk of the waste with a dado blade, and then finish cleaning things up with a chisel. This ensures a nice crisp shoulder and is especially helpful with this thermally modified wood, which is more brittle than normal wood and has a higher chance of chipping. There we go. Two sort of side assemblies ready to go. Next I can take care of the long connecting rails. The process for cutting these is very similar to the others, however these tenons are offset in the part's thickness. After the tenons are formed to thickness, the various cuts to cut them to width can be made. Before these things can fit into their mortises, the corners need to be removed to fit the rounded ends of the mortise, the only downside of a router cut mortise. Luckily, this is purely a utilitarian thing, and I can just knock off that material and get it out of the way. Lastly, several of these mortises intersect, so to make the tenons fit, I'll cut a 45-degree bevel onto the tenons. Next, I can start on the armrest joinery, starting with the mortises. The armrest block gets a mortise cut into the underside where it will connect with the front leg. A mortise is added to the rear leg, which will receive the back of the armrest. At the table saw, I'll saw away the excess material where the front leg will go, and then I'll work on creating the tenon on the top of that front leg. The odd shape of the leg requires a spacer to be used on half of the cuts. Next, I'll start forming the angle tenon on the back of the armrest. I'll scribe the shoulder with a knife using my bevel gauge and a square to wrap the shoulder line all the way around. I'll roughly form the tenon with a dado blade, staying away from the line, and I'll cut it to width at the bandsaw. Before cleaning up the tenon, I'll shape the armrest using the template I made of my design. Once that shaping is done, some chisel work finishes up these shoulders, and I can test assemble the side assemblies. Next, I'll add the backrest, starting with cutting the curve into the crest rail. I'll make the rough cut at the bandsaw and fair the curves with the compass plane. All right, that is one out of breath mat and one curved and faired crest rail ready to go. The back slats are going to go up into the crest rail, so start that joinery by cutting the groove in the underside of the crest rail with a slot cutter. Now I can make all of those back slats, 14 of them to be exact, except I made a couple extras just in case. With those out of the way, I can start working on the mortises in the lower rail. I'll use a divider to space them out, and then use the router to create all 14 mortises in 12 minutes. Now it's time for the tenons. The bottom of each slat receives a tenon to fit into those mortises. Same process here as all the other tenons, there's just a lot of them. With things assembled, I can mark where the slats will go into the crest rail and cut them to length. Now I can fill the space between each slat in the crest rail with a block. I use the offcut from the curve for this, so I end up with a similar color and grain. I'll align each slat correctly, cut a spacer of the correct length, and glue it into place. Once the glue is set, the excess can be cut and flush trimmed away. And while things are disassembled, I'll cut the bevels onto the two lower rails. Now I can take care of the seat area. I'll start by creating the double mortise and tenon joint that will attach the middle seat support. Due to the orientation of the parts, there isn't a whole lot of long grain to long grain glue surface, so splitting the tenon into two doubles the glue surface into something closer to significant. This is essentially a box joint in the middle of a board. And yes, I was too lazy to disassemble the bench while cutting these mortises. With those mortises out of the way, I can make the mating tenons on the seat support. Next, the seat supports get a little curve so the seat will conform to a butt and be comfortable. I'll cut and fair one of them and use it as a template to route the other two exactly the same. So now with that all out of the way, next we can go ahead and prep our stock for our seat slats. A little bit of jointing, planing, and resawing. I'll start the install by cutting the front slat to length and ripping it to width. Next, the rear slat gets a bevel ripped on the rear edge, which matches the lean of the backrest. The rear slat then joins the others to be squared up and trimmed to final length. The rear slat then gets notched so it fits around the rear legs, and the slats get ripped to final width. That takes care of the construction, so now it's on to finish prep. I'll be pre-finishing all the parts before glue up, so I'll work through the sanding process with the thought in mind that I will not be able to adjust anything once the bench is glued up. Parts and the side assemblies come together flush, so I'll sand those dry assembled. On these parts, I also need to be careful of edge treatment. I don't want to break any edges which intersect with another part. So again, I'll break edges with the side assemblies dry assembled. I like a more squared off edge, so I'm lightly breaking the edges by hand. This produces roughly a 1/16 inch roundover. Also, while I have everything taken apart, I'll drill in countersink holes in the seat supports for the screws which will attach the seat slats. I can also take care of gluing the two lower rails together at this point so they go through the finishing process as one part. I'll slide on the legs temporarily to help keep these parts aligned. The bottoms of the legs receive an epoxy coating so they won't wick moisture from the ground. And the last bit of finish prep is to mask off the tenons. Now I'm ready for a finish. I went with a simple teak oil for this project since thermally modified wood is already a great outdoor wood. The finish will bring out the color of the wood and offer a bit of UV resistance. It will also be easy to maintain in the future as refresher coats can be easily applied. This oil just gets flooded on and is allowed to soak in for 20 minutes, at which point any excess finish that's still on the surface can be wiped away with a rag. I'll let the pieces sit for a few days before starting the glue up. I'm using epoxy for this glue up because of its long working time and also because it's not a water-based glue. Water-based PVA glues aren't super effective with thermally modified wood because of its inherent water resistance. I'm doing the glue up in 2 phases, starting with the entire back assembly. I used clamps on the slats to make sure their tendons were fully pulled into their mortises. And I ran out of small clamps pretty quickly. The next day I can continue the glue up by assembling the remaining parts. And then the next day after that glue had cured, I could attach the seat slats using screws through the holes I had drilled previously. And with those slats installed, this guy is done. So if you want to learn how to build your own bench just like this one, I have a series of 13 instructional videos over in the Wood Guild that you can check out. That takes you through the entire process from design, lumber selection, cutting those mortises, cutting those tenons, doing all the shaping on the parts, all the thought process and mentality of pre-finishing and the glue up and working with a thermally modified wood, which was something that was a little bit new to me. So I'll leave you a link to that down in the description if you want to check that out. So I am super thrilled the way this thing turned out. Personally, for me, this is like one of the more straightest grain things I've ever made in my entire life. But I did manage to sneak some crotch figure into the crest rail up here, so at least there's got that little bit of my personal touch on it. I'm really happy with the design. It is super comfortable to sit in. The armrest feels really good in the arm. The lean on the backrest is really comfortable, and the height here is quite nice too. It kind of hits really nicely on the back, and I could picture myself sitting out here, maybe with my wife right here, enjoying a nice summer evening here, or summer day in the backyard. So that's gonna do it for this one. Thank you as always for watching. I greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments on the garden bench or anything back in my shop, please feel free to leave me a comment. As always, I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. And until next time, happy woodworking.